Imagine a powerful spiritual secret, a gateway to a deeper connection with God, something that the great men of faith practiced for centuries but that many people today completely overlook. That secret is fasting. But don't get it twisted. Fasting isn't just about skipping meals. There's a much deeper meaning behind this practice, something that can transform your relationship with God, the way you see the world, and even your own purpose. And what if I told you there are certain things you should never do while fasting? A lot of people make mistakes that can completely cancel out the spiritual benefits of fasting. If you want to learn how to fast the right way and avoid spiritual pitfalls, stick with me until the end of this video, because today we're uncovering the mystery of fasting and its power to bring you closer to God. All throughout history, fasting has been a tool for spiritual transformation. Jesus fasted for 40 days before starting his ministry. Daniel used fasting to seek divine revelation. Elijah, Hannah, Esther, and many other biblical figures turned to fasting during life-altering moments. But do we truly understand the real purpose of fasting? Or are we just following traditions without grasping their essence? Today, we're going deep into what the Bible teaches about fasting and how it can change your life. You're about to discover why fasting draws God closer, how it purifies the soul and strengthens the spirit. We'll break down the different types of fasting, what happens when you fast with the wrong mindset, and the one major mistake you should never make while fasting. If you've ever tried fasting but felt like nothing changed, you might be doing something wrong. So get ready for a spiritual journey that could transform your faith forever. If fasting were just about skipping meals, then anyone on a diet would automatically be closer to God. But that's not how it works. Fasting is so much more than simply giving up food. It's an act of deep surrender, a conscious declaration of total dependence on the Creator. It's a way of saying with both your body and soul that God's presence is more valuable than any physical need. When we fast, we're sending a silent cry to heaven. More than the bread that sustains my body, I need your presence that sustains my soul. This kind of surrender attracts God because it demonstrates true humility and a willingness to let go of the temporary things of this world in pursuit of the eternal. That's exactly what Jesus did before beginning his ministry. He stepped away from everything, left behind all human comfort, and fasted for 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness, spiritually preparing himself for the mission ahead. It wasn't just a physical sacrifice, it was a process of spiritual strengthening to face temptation, challenges, and above all, fulfill the will of the Father. But fasting wasn't something that only Jesus practiced. Since ancient times, it has been a powerful tool for seeking direction, repentance, and divine intervention. The Bible is filled with stories of men and women who turned to fasting in times of crisis, when they needed answers, or when they were longing for spiritual renewal. Daniel fasted for 21 days, giving up desirable foods while seeking understanding and divine revelation. Elijah, in a moment of deep despair and exhaustion, fasted before his transformative encounter with God at Mount Horeb, where he received new direction for his life and ministry. Esther, facing the threat of genocide against her people, called for a collective fast so that God would bring deliverance, and her act of faith changed the course of an entire nation. These examples show that fasting was never just a religious custom, but a living, active act of faith, one that moves the heart of God and shifts circumstances that seem impossible from a human perspective. God delights in fasting because it reflects our willingness to sacrifice something for Him. In the fast-paced, self-indulgent world we live in, where everything is instant and designed to satisfy personal desires, fasting becomes an act of resistance. It teaches us to say no to excess and yes to dependence on God. In a time when we are constantly encouraged to consume without limits, fasting invites us to pause and remember that we don't live by material things alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. It is a silent act that echoes in heaven as a confession of humility and total dependence. While the world chases instant gratification, the one who fasts empties themselves so that God can fill them completely. It's as if we're saying, "Lord, my greatest hunger isn't for what this world can offer, it's for you." And that kind of cry never goes unnoticed by God. The Bible teaches that God draws near to those who seek Him with sincerity, and fasting is one of the most intense ways to express that deep longing. However, fasting only carries real power when it's done with the right heart. In Zechariah 7:5, God asks the people of Israel a striking question. Was it really for me that you fasted? This verse exposes a danger that many overlook. It's possible to fast without actually seeking God. Fasting can become an empty ritual, a mechanical routine with no real transformation if we do it just out of tradition or to appear more spiritual to others. God isn't interested in mindless sacrifices, religious gestures with no meaning, or fasts done for mere formality. He wants hearts that are truly surrendered, broken, and thirsty for His presence. Fasting is not a bargaining chip. It's not a way to manipulate God into giving us blessings. It should be a genuine reflection of our spiritual hunger, a real expression of our desire to be closer to the Father. So before you start a fast, take a moment for honest self-reflection. Ask yourself, am I fasting to draw closer to God, or just to follow a religious tradition? Fasting shouldn't be a shallow act. It should be a deep journey of transformation. If you're fasting just to look more spiritual or out of a sense of religious obligation, you're missing the true essence of it. True fasting shapes us, transforms us, and takes us to a deeper level of intimacy with God. It's not an end in itself, but a powerful means of disconnecting from the noise of the world so we can hear the voice of our Creator. When we fast the right way, we don't just grow closer to God. We become more sensitive to His will, stronger in spirit, and more prepared to fulfill our purpose. Let fasting be more than just a time of abstinence for you. Let it be a tool of spiritual renewal that impacts every area of your life. Now that we understand that fasting is a spiritual pursuit and not just a food restriction, we need to talk about how to fast the right way. Fasting isn't just about skipping meals. It should be done with purpose, with intention, and most importantly, with a heart fully turned toward God. When we fast correctly, our minds become clearer to hear God's voice, and our spirits grow stronger to face both spiritual and personal challenges. However, fasting the wrong way can turn this powerful practice into nothing more than an empty sacrifice with no real value. The Bible gives us clear instructions on how this spiritual discipline should be carried out, and Jesus teaches us that the motivation behind fasting is just as important as the act itself. Jesus didn't hold back when teaching about fasting. He warned us not to use fasting as a public display of spirituality, but rather as a genuine pursuit of God's presence. In Matthew 6:16-18, he says, "When you fast, do not look somber like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full." These words from Jesus are a clear warning against spiritual hypocrisy. Many people, in an attempt to appear holier, make a big deal about their fasts or intentionally look weak just to gain admiration from others. But Jesus makes it clear, when we do that, we are seeking human approval instead of God's approval. And if recognition from people is what we're after, then that's all we'll get, not the divine reward that God has for those who truly seek Him. This means that fasting should be intimate, personal, and for God alone. If you're fasting with the intention of impressing others, you've already lost the true meaning of it. God is not pleased with fasts done out of vanity, pride, or to gain spiritual status. Instead, when we fast in secret, with a genuine commitment to seek God's presence, He rewards us in supernatural ways. Jesus Himself teaches us, "But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." Matthew 6:17-18. This reward can come in many ways: spiritual clarity, increased faith, answered prayers, or even divine direction for our lives. Another crucial point is that fasting must always be accompanied by prayer. Without prayer, fasting is nothing more than a diet with no spiritual impact. Fasting without prayer is like turning off your phone and expecting God to call you back. Prayer is the direct channel of communication between you and God. If you fast but don't pray, you're just going hungry, not drawing closer to the Creator. The Bible shows us that major divine breakthroughs happened when fasting was combined with sincere prayer. In Acts 13:2-3, we see that the early church fasted and prayed before making big decisions. The disciples didn't rely solely on human logic to guide their actions. They fasted so that God would reveal His will and give them clear direction. This teaches us that fasting should never be separate from prayer, but rather serve as a powerful addition to it, intensifying our spiritual pursuit and transformation. There are different types of fasting, and each person can find the one that makes the most sense for their spiritual journey. Absolute fast. No food, no water. This should be done with caution and only for short periods, as it can physically impact the body. This type of fast is usually practiced in urgent situations, like when Esther called the Jewish people to a 3-day total fast before she approached the king, Esther 4:16. Partial fast. This is when certain foods are avoided, but a basic diet is maintained. The Daniel fast is a great example. Daniel gave up desirable foods, meat, and wine, dedicating himself to prayer and studying God's word. This kind of fast is an excellent way for beginners to ease into fasting and develop spiritual discipline. Non-food fasts. Fasting isn't just about food. You can also fast from social media, entertainment, distractions, or anything that is consuming too much of your time and pulling you away from God. This type of fast helps refocus your heart and mind on what truly matters. If you've never fasted before, start small. You can begin by skipping one meal and dedicating that time to prayer and Bible study. This might seem like a small step, but what really matters isn't the length of your fast. It's the sincerity of your heart while doing it. Over time, as your faith grows, you can increase the intensity and duration of your fasts. The most important thing to remember is that fasting should never feel like a burden or a religious obligation. Instead, it should be a moment of surrender and spiritual growth. Every time you give something up to seek more of God, you're taking a deeper step in your faith journey. Fasting is a powerful spiritual tool, but it only brings real results when done with understanding and purpose. It's not just a physical sacrifice, it's a conscious decision to seek God on a deeper level. It teaches us discipline, humility, and total dependence on the Lord. When done correctly, fasting can completely transform your spiritual life, opening your eyes to truths you may not have seen before and giving you clarity for important decisions. Let your fasting be more than just avoiding food. Let it be a time of renewal, growth, and transformation. When you fast with sincerity and dedication, you won't just get closer to God, you'll experience a deeper level of communion and revelation, allowing His presence to transform your life in an extraordinary way. Now we've reached the most crucial part of this video. If there's one thing that can completely cancel out the spiritual benefits of fasting, it's doing it the wrong way. The biggest mistake people make when fasting is turning it into an empty ritual, a mechanical act with no real purpose, or worse, treating it like a bargaining chip with God. How many times have we heard people say, "I'm fasting, so God will give me this blessing," or "If I fast for this many days, God will have to answer me." This kind of mindset reduces fasting to a negotiation, as if God were obligated to fulfill our desires just because we stopped eating. But fasting is not a way to manipulate God. It's not a tool to pressure Him into action, but rather a way for us to draw closer to Him and align our hearts with His will. God isn't moved by empty sacrifices or fasts done with the wrong intentions. He's not pleased with outward practices that don't reflect an inner change. True fasting is not just a physical deprivation, it's an invitation to a transformed heart and a humbled spirit. In Isaiah 58, God directly confronts the people of Israel for this very reason. They were fasting, yet still practicing injustice, exploiting others, and keeping hardened hearts. God tells them clearly that true fasting isn't just about abstaining from food. It's about seeking justice, helping the needy, and living in holiness. He asks, "Is this the kind of fast I have chosen, only a day for people to humble themselves?" Isaiah 58:5. God makes it clear, the fasting that truly pleases Him is the one that comes with real-life change, a heart willing to love others and do good. If you're fasting, but still living a life that goes against God's principles, holding on to selfishness, and refusing to let fasting transform your actions, then your fast means nothing. The purpose of fasting isn't just to remove something from your body. It's to add something to your soul. It should lead to a greater commitment to righteousness, compassion, and the pursuit of God's presence. If your fasting is just about skipping meals, but your life remains the same before and after, then something is wrong. Fasting without heart. Change is like an athlete training without discipline. The effort is wasted because the right intention is missing. Never start a fast while holding on to unforgiveness. Fasting is meant to be a time of deep connection with God, but how can we truly connect with Him if our hearts are full of bitterness, anger, or unresolved pain? The Bible teaches that a hardened heart filled with resentment blocks our prayers from being heard. In Mark 11:25, Jesus instructs us, "And when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them, so that your Father in heaven may forgive your sins." This means that before starting a fast, We need to examine our hearts and remove anything that might hinder our connection with God. Nothing weakens the power of fasting like an unforgiving heart. Think about it. You're seeking a time of spiritual purification, but if your heart is weighed down with bitterness, it's like trying to fill a broken cup. Nothing stays. Everything leaks out. Fasting shouldn't just be an external change. It should be an internal renewal. So before you begin a fast, stop and examine yourself. If there's someone you need to forgive, forgive them. If there's something in your life that needs to be confessed before God, confess it. Let go of bitterness, pride, and resentment. Come before God with a clean heart and pure hands, because He isn't looking at just what you stop eating. He's looking at the real transformation happening inside of you. True fasting draws us closer to God, not because we become more spiritual for a few days, but because we become more like Christ in our attitudes and intentions. When we fast with a sincere heart, full of love and free from bitterness, that's when God delights in our pursuit and rewards us. Not because we manipulated Him, but because we positioned ourselves to receive His grace and direction. Now you have a deeper understanding of fasting, not as just a sacrifice, but as a powerful way to connect with God and transform your life. Fasting isn't about deprivation, it's about preparation. It molds us, strengthens us, and brings us closer to the heart of the Father. But remember, true fasting is not just about avoiding food. It's about letting go of everything that keeps us away from God. If you fast with sincerity, with a willing heart, and free from bitterness, then get ready, because something powerful is about to happen in your life. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever fasted before? What was your experience like? Or if you've never fasted, do you feel led to start? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and I'd love to know how this message has impacted you. If this content made sense to you and helped you understand fasting in a new way, don't forget to leave a like. It helps me keep bringing you more teachings like this. And if you're not part of our community yet, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single video. May God bless you and strengthen you in your spiritual journey. See you in the next video.